causing it to crash into the Pentagon at approximately 9:37 a.m., killing all passengers on board. The lives of 3 students and 3 teachers attending Ketchum Elementary, Leckie Elementary, and Bacchus Middle School were lost that day. We were able to speak with Hazel Etney, a journalist who interviewed the mother of Rodney Dickens, an 11-year-old from Ketchum Elementary who was aboard one of the hijacked planes, and here's what she had to say.
It was kind of surreal to her. She wasn't weeping and crying at that time as you would have thought. And it's because we were all numb. She was numb. I could see her heart was broken. You know, I could see all of the emotions that were deep inside of her, but they had not come up yet.
I'm currently standing outside of Leckie Elementary School Memorial Garden, which was implemented on September 11, 2003, and dedicated to honor the teacher, student, and 2 parents from Leckie Elementary who were killed in the Pentagon attack. Many teachers believe that over the years, the history and the purpose of those memorials have been lost to students and staff.
After about 10 years, I don't think schools do anything. I just find it important to continue to teach them and expose them. And again, also letting them know with that connection of, you go to school in DC, this happened to students. It could have been us on a plane going on a field trip, and a super great field trip that we got to get on a plane, and you know, all of those things. It could have been us. It could have been anybody. Like letting them know, you know, explaining that part of it. I remember it, so I can't let them forget it.
In Washington, D.C., Tanaya Key for HU News Service.
Yes, kid. Boys and girls, sound this word out. Get ready. Steel. What word?
Steel.
Yes, steel. Read these words the fast way. Get ready.
Play.
Yes, playing. Get ready.
Must.
Yes, must. Let's read these words the fast way without making a mistake. Get ready.
Kite.
Yes, kite. Get ready.
Kick.
Yes, kicks. And 60 on page 153. At the count of 3, try it again. Get ready from the beginning of that sentence. Get ready.
She played with her goat in her house.
Go on.
She played with her goat in her yard.
Good job. Go on.
Mr. President, are you aware of the reports of the plane crash in New York? Is there anything?
Talk about it later.
Thank you all.
You can step out the door we came in.
That was devastating. And we all know, excuse me. Sonya, Stacy, let's get together here. I need you all to kind of jump in on this conversation.
Hi, Denise.
Because you can imagine the president looking at those kids.
Oh, yeah.
And thinking, this is our future. Do we have one? Stacy, Sonya, you were there. You were with the President Bush on that day. Talk about that experience.
Well, I first of all, Denise, thanks for having me here and giving me a chance to discuss this very monumental moment in American history. It's so important that we don't forget even the smallest details about that day. I was there in Florida with the president. I was standing in the back of that classroom. And I got to tell you, it was abundantly clear to me that his primary concern was the innocence of those children in that room. He didn't want to discuss anything that traumatic in front of them, any more than we wanted to yell a question like that at him in front of those children. At least I didn't. I didn't want to. I understand when it's a situation where you've got to yell a question at the president, the men's voices carry. And when women yell, it can be alarming, especially for children. It's sort of a maternal thing, I suppose, that they respond to a woman's voice in a different way. So I was content to let the voices carry while I tried to find another way to confirm what was going on.
Stacy, you weren't there, but you've covered, you have your memories from that day. Talk about it.
Yeah, first of all, I'm with you, Denise and Sonia. That's amazing. I did read your story about you being there, but watching, I had never really seen that clip before, and watching the president, it just instantly gave me a newfound respect for George W. Bush, the way he handled that situation with those kids. That was amazing. But in any event, I was in New York at the time. I lived in New York. I was born and raised in New York, and I was actually covering something that should have been at the biggest story, if not of the day, certainly of the week, perhaps of the year. I was sent to cover that Tuesday morning to be at a school in Mount Vernon, New York. A teacher was being arrested in Mount Vernon for hijacking a plane 30 years earlier. That was going to be the biggest story of the day, of the week, or whatever. And by the time I got back to the office, because I had to go to the school really early, the FBI had made the arrest. By the time I got back to the office in nearby New Rochelle, New York, the first plane had just hit. All my colleagues were surrounding the television station in the newsroom, and someone yelled out, "Wow, what an accident!" And then, not long after that, a second plane hit. And I'll never forget my colleague. His name is Ken Kennelly, and Ken said, "Hey guys, this is no accident. This is an attack on America." And we just all kind of stopped, and it's like, wow. And everyone started calling their loved ones. I mean, it was really a unforgettable sight.
Sonya, you left that. You were on Air Force One with President Bush, right?
Yes, for the whole day.
For the whole day.
From when we left Sarasota up until he returned to the White House.
Describe, not only, if you can, sort of, what his movements were like that you may have seen, but also what was happening with the press corps.
The press corps.
And we should say, because I apologize, I got into a moment there and I didn't properly introduce you all, but you were with Associated Press.
Yes, at the time I was a White House reporter for the AP.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure that folks knew that you weren't, the stewardess or the.
No, I was a reporter covering. I had at that point been covering the White House for about 6 years.
Okay, all right.
Wonderful. As a matter of fact, it was exactly 6 years. Because my first day on that beat was September 11th, 1995. So yes, it was exactly 6 years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So again, talk about, what it was like to be on Air Force One, not only with the president, but the press corps as well. And, what you all were thinking or what you observed during that time.
Well, that press corps travels with the president like that simply because it's what they would call protective pool or body watch. So someone is always on the scene to cover the news that breaks around the president. This was the first time that I can recall there being news of this magnitude to handle with the president. While the president was on the road, normally the president's at the White House most of the time when the big news goes down. So the White House itself is portable. It travels with the president wherever he goes. Therefore, the White House, the executive branch of government, was functioning in a road mode. They were not tethered, so to speak, to things back home or things back in Washington. The press corps that was traveling with him, we had a larger contingent of reporters who made the trip to Florida, but the pool, which goes with the president's movements, was only about a dozen or so. And when the attack happened and we left Sarasota and made it to the next destination, that pool of 12 was narrowed down even further to just 5 of us. And that is the first time in history that they had ever activated that plan to narrow the travel pool even further. It was called casually the nuclear bunker pool. It's a function of Cold War strategy of if the president has to be taken somewhere for his safety, if an atomic bomb is being dropped on the United States, this is the way the press would move accordingly. I don't know why they thought absolute chaos and Armageddon and mayhem wouldn't be happening around the press corps and the president in a moment like that. But they had a plan in place.
Mhm.
And when everything was over, I had a conversation with my esteemed colleague, Helen Thomas of UPI. And she informed me that that was the plan that had been put in place since the height of the Cold War, to take 5 journalists along with the president if he's ever evacuated to the nuclear bunker.
And I understand that you were not the only Black reporter. There were 2 others. Is that the case?
Yes, on that overall pool, there were a dozen or so reporters, and out of that, 4 of us were Black. And when the pool was reduced even further down to 5, 3 of us made that trip. It was myself, Eric Washington, and George Christian. And they were the cameraman and sound guy, respectively, for CBS News. CBS was the broadcast or network pool that day. And the CBS producer was Keir Baskerville. So CBS actually had an all-Black team traveling with President Bush that day.
That's amazing. You know, you know, even those of us here in Washington, you know, with the Washington Informer, and, you know, we're trying to get our story. We're, as you know, are not a subscriber to AP. Stacy, I think the institution you were working for at the time, you can tell us who that is.
Yeah, it's Gannett.
Yeah, and so I mean, how are you all getting information, or how were you able to feed information to your readers after that point?
Well, you know, like AP, Gannett at that time anyway, you know, you had bureaus everywhere. It's almost like what we designed, or what was designed 81 years ago for the NMPA, right? To have newspapers everywhere. And Gannett did have newspapers everywhere, and everyone has their sources, Denise, and really good sources. It may not have risen to the level of AP. People will argue about that. But we did have sources at the White House, sources. I mean, no one had a viewpoint than our guest this afternoon, right? But we had sources everywhere feeding us information. Then there are some, like myself, native New Yorkers, knows the World Trade Center inside and out. Knows everything that is around the World Trade Center, and who also experienced some years earlier. People forget, Denise, and I know Sonya doesn't forget, that 1994, I think it was, that there was a terrorist attack at the World Trade Center then. And so when this happened, no one expected planes to be used. But this some years earlier, just 7 years earlier, there was another attack. So you're kind of prepared. You're never really prepared, but you're kind of prepared on how to react when this thing happens, who to call, where to go for your sources.
You know, both of you all, and I'm trying to be cognizant of time, but I can listen to stories, you know, all day long. And I am just so grateful, Sonya, that you've had the opportunity to tell your stories, not only just to us, but others who have written pieces on you. I think I want to keep on to say Mademoiselle, but the magazine article that was a great piece. That was
Marie Claire.
Yes.
Marie Claire magazine.
Right, Marie Claire, and so many others. But you know, I have sitting in my space right now a young journalist from Howard University, interested in production. We just saw the video that another Howard student did on 9/11. You know, you both have had a great deal of experience in this industry. And news, I mean, we're writing about catastrophes a lot. What kind of advice would you give to younger journalists in preparation for how serious a business this is, and what they need to keep in mind? Because you didn't know, Sonya, that you were going to. Air Force One was great. Did you know you would be? You didn't even know about the 5, right? You didn't even know about that, but you were evidently prepared for that moment. Just give us some advice. You and Stacy.
Gosh. Well, I would say two things matter a lot in this, especially in this time that we're in. That is accuracy. Accuracy matters even more so now that we live in an era of disinformation and outright lies and everything. So be eager to get a story first, but be more eager to get it right. Double check your facts. Make sure your sources are on point, and make sure that any information that you're going to put your name on is as accurate as you can possibly find. Make sure accuracy matters. And then the other piece of advice I would give is there is always a story in the follow-up. Follow up. If there was a story out there that caught your interest, follow up. The piece that I saw, the Howard University students piece, I thought was fabulous because it's the quintessence of follow up. It is, let's go back to the school and see what's going on there and tell this story through a different lens. I saw a photograph of the students and their teachers that I have never seen before. And see, this is what you can get in the follow-up. So follow up. That story caught your interest, go follow up and see what's going on with it. You did a story before and you left it at a certain point, go back and see what's going on with it now. Sometimes there may not be anything going on, but most of the time there is something there that you can report. There is always a story in the follow-up.
And Stacy, I mean, you're still here. You're still in the midst of this business. Now you're working with the Black press. But tell us, what lessons you learned.
So, Sonya just nailed it, of course, about following up. She probably certainly remembers, like I do, that, journalists, we talk about sources. We could go to a bar, we'd sit in a bar, we'd have a drink and talk to people, and people would talk to us. And we've developed some really great sources, go to a hair salon or a barbershop. Now, of course, in this age of social media, one of the things I would caution, and I think it goes along with what Sonya was saying, I would caution young journalists not to put too much credence on what you see on the internet. You got to go out. You have to. The best story is never told from your couch, from your desk. The best story is always told when you're on the scene. Sonya, a great example of that. We just talked about that. She was with the president. She was there. That story would have been totally different for her to tell if she was in the office, in AP's office somewhere in Washington or New York or somewhere else. We have to go and get out there. I've always believed, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, many of us, myself included, haven't been able to go out and get in the mix as nearly as much as we'd like to. But as soon as this thing breaks, as soon as this pandemic ends, you certainly try to get out. Denise, young reporters, get out there, talk to people, always talk. One of the things that I love about being a journalist, I've been a journalist 30 years, is the fact that we get paid to be nosy, to get into people's business. I love it. And so take advantage of that. Police officers talk to us, criminals talk to us, presidents, everyone talks to us, right? And many of them, if you talk to them and let them know that you're interested, and it's not just officials, and certainly everyday people, just let them know that you're interested in them and their story. You'll get so much more from that individual, from those sources, and keep that Rolodex. I know we don't have literal Rolodex now, but for every person you meet, my advice has always been, you had an editor, Denise, who had the same name, Denise Barnes, right? Who always talked about, this Rolodex, right? But exactly. My Rolodex is you talk to that person and get 2 more people from that person and add them to your source list. Ask that person, to refer you to 2 more people. That's why that's how you're able to really cultivate a really big book, if you will, of sources.
I told Sonya earlier, I said the WIN TV always starts on time, but we may not end up end on time. And I know Shevry and Desiree are probably saying it's 1:00, but I got one more question to ask. Because we have seen, as a result of 9/11, the country changed, right? And we ended up in a war. And President Biden just got us out, our troops out of Afghanistan. We were in war with Afghanistan and Iraq. And the country has changed quite a bit, in my opinion. But I'd like to know, just from your perspectives, what is some major change you think occurred either in your institutions or just in generally as it relates to all Americans, that we need to reflect on what this war did to us as a nation. Sonya, do you have a response?
I do. I think that domestic terror now is very different than domestic terror before, and yet it is still the same. I think the environment that we began living in post 9/11, with a large focus on terrorism, for most people redefined what terrorism is, and in their minds, the only terrorists we ever saw came from outside the United States and were Middle Eastern or were Muslim or some other origin beyond your average everyday white bread American. Well, in the years that we have seen since, the domestic terrorists that we have in this country have become even more emboldened. And because they take that redefinition that was fine-tuned after 9/11 to mean that these aren't terrorists. The Ku Klux Klan, separatists, they're not terrorists, no matter what the Southern Poverty Law Center has been saying about them for many, many years. So now we find ourselves in a time where they do represent a humongous threat to this country, our nation, and our stability. And I think that is something that we have to redefine. We have to go back and redefine terrorism for what it means within the borders of the United States and govern ourselves accordingly.
Interesting. Stacy, how about you?
Yeah, I just think that there's no question freedom isn't free. We've learned that in a huge way. But we also learned too, more than anything else, the freedom of the press is so important. We had the former president try to do his best to eliminate the freedom of the press. And there are still factions that are still working to take away the freedoms of the press. It is so important, especially at the community journalism level, especially at the level, the Washington Informer, you put a newspaper, a physical paper out once a week, but now it's every day, of course, online. But especially at that level, your local Black newspapers, it's so important to keep them going, because we're telling these stories that you need to know. We're giving you warnings. Last year, real quick, the NMPA, the Black press, was the first to say that the coronavirus was airborne. We did our homework. We talked to experts, and we were the first. A week later, the New York Times did a big story, said it's airborne. We've learned it's airborne. Well, we had already done that. We declared a state of emergency for Black America. So freedom of the press, freedom of the Black press is paramount. And that is the lesson, one of the biggest lessons from post 9/11 that I believe that we can share with younger ones.
Well, I want to thank both of you all for being with us and sharing your stories and, your reflections on that date. I mean, we look back, we have our personal experiences, but as a country, we're moving forward and we have to look at where we are today. But all of that, I look at it as Sankofa, looking backwards as we move forwards, because we have to know from whence we came in order to know where we're going. So I want to thank both of you all for being with us. Sonya, before we go, I just wanted you to give a plug about your website and what you're doing with that.
Oh, sure. We are Black Women Unmuted. We tell the untold and undertold stories about Black women, primarily in the political arena. You can find us at blackwomenunmuted.com. Please follow us on social, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at @BeUnmuted. And come along with us as we try to take the sisters off mute one story at a time.
All right.
And read Sonya's story about 9/11 that one day wrote about. Unbelievable. Everybody's got to read that.
Exactly. And Stacy, folks can find you every morning at 7:30 with your show. Can you share that with us?
Yes, Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. It's called Let It Be Known. It's right here on Facebook, on YouTube, Black Press USA TV, Twitter. Seems like so many people are watching on Twitter, Instagram. Now we have TikTok too, so watch us there. It's called Let It Be Known.
All right. Thanks both of you all. Stay safe. And know, you always have a home here. We want to make sure that Black folks remain unmuted. So
thank you, Denise.
Thanks a lot for joining us. All righty. Have a great one.
Take care.
So